I would like to invite Anurag Acharya, Director Policy Entrepreneurs, Inc. from Nepal.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Let me begin by thanking Center for Governance Studies and congratulating them for organizing this wonderful event with important issues at hand for discussion, and none so important as this one that we are discussing about the dangers of misinformation and disinformation. To begin with, misinformation has always been around. We know, like always a concern for society, especially in the developing world, where sources of information were limited in the past, often controlled by the state. It was easy for somebody to be misinformed or be manipulated, which sometimes spiraled out of control and often influenced public opinion. Earlier, it was more due to how information was shared that misinformation spread. I can give you an example of how public were misinformed about the risk of HIV, back in my country, resulting in stigma against those infected and survivors. Like we've had that experience in other parts of the world as well. Of course, there were also some deliberate attempts in other cases to disinform people. Example, you might have heard in South Asia, we have heard about God statues drinking milk, which made large headlines in the media, and UFO sightings, I think many in Western part of the world, or even predicting apocalypse. Like that happens in any part of the world. Very rarely did those kind of disinformation become a challenge or a tragedy for our societies at the scale that we are seeing now. The states or the government back then could at least control or intercept such disinformation and take countermeasures. But the kind of disinformation that we are seeing in the new age of internet and social media with photoshops, deep fakes, it's a completely different beast. It has come to become an effective or even an acceptable tool or a technology-powered weapon in the hands of individuals, interest groups, or even those in the government to serve their vested or ulterior motives. And the risk or the consequences transcend are not just confined within the country, they transcend the boundaries. And like, for instance, we talk about the campaign for climate change denials, targeted disinformation against the vaccine, or even the conspiracy theory around 5G technology that we have seen in different countries. But the impacts and consequences are greater for developing countries, where public awareness or literacy levels can be lower, especially regarding the technological sophistication about how the disinformation spreads. I can give you an example from my own country where, it would be easier for me to talk to, people from my generation about disinformation, but it is extremely difficult to convince people of, elderly citizens to convince them about the genuine news or the fake news. It's very difficult for them to comprehend how a photo or even a video can be doctored. And there are a lot of people that are not, highly literate. So it's very easy to manipulate that section of the population. So things get more challenging when political interests also come into play over here. Like a few years back in Nepal, there was a kind of, communal violence which was incited by spreading of fake videos or fake photos of that hurt religious sentiment of one community. Like now we are seeing those kind of incidents repeated. Only in the last few months, we have had 3 or 4 incidents where the attempt to incite hate against the minorities by spreading videos or photos of content, which were not necessarily, happening in Nepal. They were happening somewhere, in the neighborhood, somewhere definitely not in our country, that were, doctored and shown as if it is happening in Nepal. And then it kind of riled up the, population. Next door, India is also, witnessing similar kind of, communal tensions, which is fueled by these kind of disinformation. I'm sure, in other parts of the, world and the region also, this kind of thing is happening. We saw how, a US aid program, a simple, development aid program in Nepal and in Sri Lanka led to a massive protest because, there were a targeted disinformation campaign, supposedly, making people believe that, accepting a simple development aid would result in de facto US establishing an, air base or a military base in the country. I can't speak for Sri Lanka. Sri Lankan friends will talk about it, but in my country, it resulted in an unfortunate death of a person, and there was large scale, widespread protest across the country, and many, property were damaged. So the biggest risk and initial consequences we are witnessing as a result of this kind of disinformation is erosion of public faith or trust in the institutions. Or democratic processes itself, including elections. There is a growing cynicism, especially among the young population of voters who don't know what to believe in or what to believe in, whom to believe. And this has given a rise or increase in the, populism, groups and individuals who feed on such cynicism and disillusionment. And there is no silver bullet solution to this kind of challenges we face. I mean, some call for tighter restrictions on social media or media as a whole, but then it's a double-edged sword where we see governments misusing control of quote-unquote disinformation to silence dissent. So it's a kind of a double-edged sword. Instead, I think what we have to propose is a more uphill task of restoring public trust back on the institutions, media, governance, government, think tanks, scholars, restore trust in the institutions, but also seek information transparency and accountability, demand accountability from the institutions. And it is easier said than done. I stand over here fully realizing this fact, but it is up to our institutions, and I'm a former journalist, so I especially think media has a greater role to play. But as somebody who's leading a think tank or a scholarly work, I also think that scholars and think tank also have an immense role to reclaim the agendas, from hearsays, social media disinformation mongers. Back and restore the credibility of the institution itself and the processes, the values, the democratic values that we also cherish. I will end on that note because this is an ongoing conversation. I'm sure my esteemed panelists will contribute to this, and I'll be able to take questions later on. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen.